Hey, listeners. In the last couple of episodes, I've talked about the benefits of CBUSA, the leading group purchasing organization in construction. We're gearing up here in Minneapolis for an annual builder event called The Summit, September 22nd through September 25th. It'll be in Minneapolis, Minnesota. This event, formerly known as the Power 30, is CBUSA's biggest event of the year. CBUSA members from across the country will come together to learn and engage in networking opportunities like face-to-face meetings with top brands and reps, interactive breakout sessions with fellow builders, and an exclusive vendor expo showcasing the latest materials. I'm excited to attend, and I'm excited to be recording a podcast episode in front of a live audience. Fellow home builders, if you want to be a part of this too, then head over to cbusa.us/learn. Additionally, if you want to hear the backstory about CBUSA, you can listen to Curious Builder episode number 26 with Ryan Lipchek.
Lake Society Magazine is Minneapolis' premier target market boutique lifestyle and design publication. It embodies the unique lifestyles and design of the Minneapolis City Lakes neighborhoods. From Lake of the Isles to Lake Harriet, it showcases the best in local design projects by both premier builders, architects, and interior designers in this area. Lake Society Magazine has the look and feel of a national publication with glossy covers, high-end finishes. It's mailed directly to upper bracket single-family homeowners in the City Lakes area, and it's the perfect local coffee tabletop publication. Subscriptions can also be available through the website lakesocietymagazine.com. Additionally, publisher and founder Karen Steckel has over 27 years in the local magazine publishing industry and has a passion for high-end photography and quality graphics. Her commitment to quality, visual simplicity, and beauty are strongly reflected in her beautiful Lake Society magazine.
Today on the podcast, we had Peter and Patrick Jacobson on from Lake Country Builders, and really a great father-son duo. It was really fun to hear Peter talk about the origin of the company and how they've transitioned and really how they've prioritized their clients and really built their company based on relationships. We talk a lot about, towards the middle end of the podcast, about their Lake Country Academy, training up carpenters, which is really a passion for Peter to really train the next generation of in-house carpenters and give them really a holistic attitude and a holistic skill set around building a home. And then towards the end, we talk a little bit about aging in place and really the design that goes into those remodels. So without further ado, here's Pete and Patrick Jacobson. Welcome to the Curious Builder Podcast. I'm Mark Williams, your host. Today I'm joined with Pete and Patrick Jacobson from Lake Country Builders, who happen to be across the street from me in Excelsior, Minnesota. Welcome, guys.
Thanks a lot, Mark. Nice to be here.
You know what? This is, in some ways, this interview is actually sort of really fun for me because while I've met Patrick probably just a few times, I have, in some ways, I feel like I've been a bad neighbor because you guys have been across the street for over a decade, and I can't say that I know you guys really well. I spend so much time, talking to builders across the country and whatnot, but it's we can all be reminded to spend a little more time with people even in our backyard. So I've been really excited to have you on and hear your story. So why don't we start there? Tell us a little bit. Why don't we start with you, Pete? You're the elder statesman in the room. Tell us a little bit about the origins of Lake Country, and then we'll talk about Patrick joining. And I always like to have a father-son on and talk a little bit about transitions and what the future holds. And I think you guys have a really amazing story. So why don't we start there?
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate that. And I guess it all started back around 1976, and it actually was I was a union journeyman carpenter for a company called Eklund & Swedlund, built a lot of homes in the western suburbs. People out here would recognize that name. But during a tough time, the recessions came, and they eventually went out of business, which means all of us had no jobs, so I was on unemployment. So basically, I started my company on unemployment. I was there with my wife, and of course, doing that, but I always wanted to start a business, and it gave me the opening to do that by putting a little 4x4 ad in the Mound paper that said, "Let the sun shine in, and I'd love to build a deck for you."
Oh, that's awesome.
So if people out there want to know how to start a business, you just have to go for it and do it and see what happens, which is basically what I did.
It's amazing. Isn't it amazing how often a business platform starts because there's an opportunity because you got laid off, because there's like a slowness. I mean, even for myself, we've expanded to maybe 6 or 7 different platforms with the Curious Builder, but the last year for me personally has been sort of slow. But I wonder, like a couple of years from now, if I'll look back and be like, well, it's only because you had that year slowdown that allowed you that extra capacity to sort of launch a new business. But it seems like you had a similar experience there, although yours is better because you're like, I got laid off, so I decided to start a business. Makes total sense.
And, one thing I could say about that, and I've been thinking about this and actually talking about it, is I compare what happened to me in that time frame the same as the big recession we went through. Because, and it's a part of what we'll talk about carpentry training, because what happened is that everybody didn't have a job. There was no work. And all the carpenters went on unemployment. And I believe what happened there was that those carpenters like I was, that was talented, knew what they were doing, started businesses.
Are those on?
Yeah, they might.
Maybe I turn those off because I can hear the high-pitched frequency.
Yeah, I compare it back to the recession because the same thing basically happened. Everybody got laid off.
Yep.
And there was all these good carpenters like I was that didn't have a job. So what'd they do? They all started businesses. I mean, a lot of them, which to me, when you look at the industry now, there's an influx of all these builders that is good for them. It's good for building, but there's just a lot more builders, I think, because of that, which leads to the shortness of carpenters in our industry because a lot of those good qualified journeymen started their businesses. So it took them out of the labor force itself, put them into business, which helped create the shortfall. That's my view of.
Interesting. I think you're always going to have ups and downs in any business, but let's take building specifically. I mean, I remember at the time, you'd have a bunch of new builders would come into play in the early 2000s, right? Because things were just rocking. And then, obviously 9, 10, 11, 12, even really well-established businesses, it was, it was a scythe through a wheat field. I mean, it really cut down a lot. And then the people that were standing had a lot more market share, right?
Right.
So it seems like, when things are good, people get into it. I think right now, in the last couple of years, you've seen a lot, to your point, Pete,
Yep.
we've seen a lot of, carpenters, trimmers, people that are like, maybe I'm going to be a builder,
Yeah.
And so they get into it. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. It's
No.
just more of just they see opportunity and good for them. They go for it. And then when things slow down, are they established enough to, make it through, let's say, a downturn, or do they go back to, some of the things that they knew before? And
Yeah, and thus is I think the core of actual business learning and business understanding and business acumen. Because if you learn that while you're doing it, you might be able to weather the storm. But if you're not astute in those things, you're not going to. So it's all part of just growing up and learning and taking risk.
I almost think there's more learning to be had in the lean times. We've had other builders on that, they're part of a family, dynasty, if you will, and they really started in 2000, I think 8 or 9. And in some ways, it's starting your career in the middle of a recession, what sounds crazy, it teaches you some really impressive lessons. Like I'm actually considering doing my first spec home for this development we have up in Orono called Honey Hill, but I haven't done a spec home in like 12 or 13 years because the last spec home I did was in 2008. And so, so I have a very long memory on, it not being a great turnout. Right. And so maybe to my own detriment, it's taken me, quite a while to unforget that. But I guess my point is we learn these lessons and I think they can be good, but sometimes they can handcuff us. And so for me personally, it's like, my memory is so, accurate for the 2008, 9, and 10 era that I'm like, you don't want to repeat that. So anyway.
Yeah, I understand that.
Well, how about you, Patrick? When did you join the business?
After college, 05, 06 time, just started in the office, started doing estimating. I'd worked in the field as carpenter at various levels before that in summers. And then, like I said, started with estimating. I then ran our small projects division, both the sales and management of those. Fast forward to today, learned all different aspects of the business, service, warranty, sales, estimating at different times, carpentry, how things go together before that. And now we just have a great team to today.
How would you say, what's your favorite part of the business now that you've been there for a while, and it seems like you've kind of run the gambit of all the different things?
Yeah, I think with how I am, just all the different parts and pieces. Maybe it's ADD mind and just really enjoying, changing gears day in, day out, helping people, in their homes, I guess overall is, I think, the most rewarding thing. And then also just working with our team. We have 12 office staff and I think 11 carpenters currently. And so just a really great team of people who like to show up and do good work for good people and have fun. So,
I mean, I've argued many times on the podcast of just like, I'm not sure you could be a business owner without some form of ADD. And so it's like, I mean, you've got to, especially in building, it's like you're starting and stopping so many things throughout the day.
Yeah.
I actually just saw something recently on Amazon. I bought it, and it's called a focus clock. And if you've ever done it where you're answering emails, then your phone lights up, and it's like, absolutely. I don't know, we're being pulled in so many directions. So I'm trying to be more intentional. I do a lot of time blocking in terms of scheduling, but I have this little clock where it's like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes. And it's like, I'll turn off my phone and everything else. And I'm only a week into it. So anyway, speaking to, constantly starting and stopping.
I'm super impressed at that. That's a very good thing to do. I think, because focus, ADD folks like myself also, we tend to be hyper-focused where when you get on something, you can't do any, you're just so zoomed in, you can't even hear people. I'm sure you know that. And, you just get drawn into that. But so having a break like that to make you stop, that's a really good idea. I like that.
Yeah, mine's almost inverse. I need to stay focused on it because I'll tend to like go off.
Oh, you tend to go off?
Yeah. Yours is, that's interesting. Do you find, we'll talk a little bit about team management in a minute. So do you do only remodeling? Do you do some new homes? I mean, I kind of know you from all the advertising I see that you guys are remodeling extraordinaires. Is that true that you do?
Yeah, that's an interesting, I think that's a good question, and there's a short story behind that. Because when I started, one of the things that I made a commitment in my mind for and learned that remodeling would be a good business to get into because people always remodel, and sometimes in downtimes they remodel. And so we made a commitment a long time ago. I used to subcontract when we first started out. I used to be a carpenter and just do labor and subcontracting for other builders. But that grew into our own jobs, of course, which then flowed into remodeling because I wasn't a big home builder or anything. So we basically focused on that and kept building that end of our business and made a commitment to that end of our business. And early on, we were one of the real early on people, along with people like Greg Black and Paul, to have design build in-house. There wasn't back then. Builders didn't have their own architect on staff, most of them. Most of them were just architects outside and you were a builder here. Well, we back then made a commitment to be a design builder, which really influenced the growth of our company and had designers on staff, which we do now. But that was a big point and kept us in that mode, which transitioned now into, do we build homes? Yes, we build a lot of homes on lakes here in Wisconsin, up north, northern Minnesota. So it just kind of grew into that. And I would say right now, Patrick, we're probably 75% remodeling, 25% new homes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You're right. That's a good balance. And I think you're 100% right, Pete. I've noticed, I always like to keep, I think I didn't get into remodeling until about 2008. Actually, that spec home I had mentioned was a home that was in foreclosure before that was in vogue. Remodeled it, and then that was my, spec home. But I've always felt like there's a healthy balance. There's, like you said, there's always people that want to, remodel. I've seen even right now, for new home construction is definitely slowed down with interest rates and the election cycle, but remodeling interest is much higher. Anyway, it's always kind of ebbing and flowing. I think that's true across the country too.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say, you guys, we bought some land up north up by Cuyuna, which is a couple hours northwest of here. But I feel like every time I go up to like Duluth, if we're running Grandma's Marathon or if I'm doing a trail race up there, it's like I see Lake Country. Not only do I see your magazine ads, which, you guys do some stuff in Wisconsin, you do stuff up north. How do you, you're right across the street from me. So I know like where your headquarters is. And so I'm like, man, how do you guys, because I've been asked before to like go up north and I'm like, I'm only as good as my people. And so it's like, I don't think my local people are going to drive 2-3 hours north, or if they do, the cost associated with that, for travel, hotel, it could be done. How have you guys managed that? And at what point did you start expanding into Wisconsin and northern Minnesota? And what are the pros and cons of that?
Yeah.
Well, I'd say we were
This could be a long.
we were up in Brainerd Lakes, 20, 30 years ago when there was a lot of development going out there, Gull Lake, Brainerd Lake chain, and kind of figured it out. It seemed like figured it out at that time that forging those close relationships with local vendors and using local tradespeople and carpenters was the way to that. So that I think would be the first answer. And forming those close relationships with the tradespeople that you can keep busy, and then also just a different approach. For instance, fast forward to today, it took us about 10 to 15 years to really get a really solid vendor groups in Wisconsin in various areas that help us implement the projects, as well as just taking a different approach to managing them, visiting them once a week. Or biweekly is also important by our PMs, and then also relying on the lead carpenters that we hire there to help manage the vendor relations. So that seemed to work well in those kind of satellite implementations.
So that was my main question, because you're right. I mean, you could eventually over time vet local plumbers, framers, different people, and eventually find your people, especially if you can do it long term. A one-off is obviously a lot harder.
Right. Yep.
But if you do it long term, that was my question, is how do you project manage it effectively?
Yep.
How do you represent Lake Country's brand? Yep. And I guess how do you do that? So are you using local project manager, or do you have a few roving project managers that maybe live up north and just kind of like stay up north, or how do you manage that?
Yeah, I'd say over different time in different areas. We've had boots on the ground a couple different times. At one point in Brainerd, we had an office and a manager up there that was local. Wisconsin, that hasn't really played out. We did try it once and may get there again. It did help a lot with that. But today, and for instance, in Wisconsin, it's just our local PMs that are managing it along with our chief operating officer. And then we're just teaming up as a leadership team to visit the site, like I said, once a week, bi-weekly, to keep eyes on it. We also do hire the lead carpenters to help kind of site supervise some of that as well.
So out of curiosity, let's say you're doing I'm really intrigued by this, mainly because I'm going to have to build my cabin up myself. It's a little self-serving here.
We'll help you.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So let's say you have, let's just say you're building out of your normal market. Well, let me go back for a second. What percentage of your work is within a 50-mile radius right now?
Well, I can say a couple of years ago, or within the last couple of years, Wisconsin and greater Minnesota projects were 20 to 25% of our total work and sales. Recently, that's gone down a little bit for no specific reason. It seems to, just like you said, in everything, ebb and flow naturally and organically. So I would say anywhere from 15 to 20% year in, year out is probably those type of projects. And then the remainder is mostly around the metro area.
Okay, that actually helps me understand it a lot better. So it's not like it's 50-50 or that you're spending. Because I was mainly wondering, like, if you are getting a dedicated project manager, it sounds like a little bit for these satellite ones, do you have one project manager that will run that project beginning to end, and that's the person that goes up there? Or do you distribute those responsibilities throughout the staff?
Yeah, I would say managing the project, yes, the prior, but I think what's worked well is just with the different leadership team. If the COO can't go there or the PM can't go there, I'll go there. Or maybe if I have sales meetings, it'll work out, so I'll stop by the site. So it's kind of a team.
You could kind of spin it both ways. I sort of like that from a client's point of view, because they get to see a number of different people from the company, especially us as owners. The homeowners can never get enough of the owners. Even if you have the best PM in the world, right, they want to talk to the owners. Yep. And even if you explain to them that, hey, my PM is, at least for me anyway, I'll say, hey, I don't have the carpentry background like you do. Or I'm like, trust me. I usually joke with my homeowners, if you see me working on the job site, like, call the PM. I'm ruining your house. But
I have personal experience also on this matter. Like Patrick said, we found out along the lines that having people from our staff there biweekly, whatever, is critical. And the reason for that, when you get outside the general cities areas and what I call into the woods, because that's where you're going, it's different. And all your business practices and your communication expectations, your financial expectations, your receipt of bids and invoice expectations, which right now you think are normal and you don't even think about because you just get them in the mail. Sometimes you don't even get an invoice, and then you get a call wondering where their money is. It's just a different way that they work. They're more. It seems like they're more concerned about happiness and what they're doing in their area and their life and their families than their business. I'm not saying that's bad. That's good.
No, I think it's actually, honestly, from a balance standpoint.
Right, that's good. Yeah. But we're looking at it from a strictly business perspective.
Understood.
So all of a sudden you get wrapped up in that. And recently I've experienced, because I built a garage and a master suite up north at my place, and I have these guys I work with. And when you start talking with these guys personally, I mean, you just get the program, which simply means over management, over communication, more time, moreover, it just takes a lot more effort to be successful. Because if you don't do those things, stuff won't get done. I mean, it's just kind of the way it is. We're working, and I think if you're planted in those areas, like builders are, and you're from that areas, it might be a little different. But to be honest, we're coming from here up there.
How do you sell that? So let's say we'll just pick I don't even know a good city, but let's just pick Brainerd, or whatever. And you're like, let's say there's a local builder there, and then there's you. And I'm guessing, correct me if I'm wrong, they're like, well, we really like what we're seeing in your ads. We really like your style. Right. We really think that's great. What is the value proposition? Because I imagine that if someone's up there building, they're like, well, hey, we sort of like that this local builder can be there a lot more than you. How do you combat that?
Go ahead.
Well, I would say it really starts with the beginning of the process, which is design and planning, and the process we've refined over the 47 years of doing business, and then so it's really worked well. Design planning here, implementing there. They see the fancy pictures and the nice structures. And if you go to those locations, a lot of times they're relying on plans that are produced by a lumberyard or more basic design structures. So it seems like with our client tell that comes to us, they really want something unique and creative, and usually in partnering with those people that we do both are in-house and out-of-house, it's really worked well in creating and planning and budgeting for those, with our team, and then implementing.
Well, another important piece that I just found out, because I had a meeting a couple weeks ago. They were actually on my lake then, and they wanted me to. It was a teardown. But another issue is when we're talking to them is that the amount, and this as a builder, the amount of planning it takes to build anything, but like a house, especially on a lake, especially up north, where there's all these different counties and different legal rules for land and zoning and all that. Mm-hmm. We're able to partner and sell the customer the amount of commitments we have at the front end of that to get them through that period to see if they can build, what they can build, and everything. Now, I'm saying that because that's a bulk of work that a knowledgeable person in construction can have with the city and the planners, and that's the flow. And you get involved, you can flow that and into construction and design. The smaller builders, let's say, up there, where if you're competing, I have this other builder that's going to charge whatever. Those types of builders typically don't get involved with that. They'll build for you. When it's ready, we'll build for you. And it's a different program. And so I think there's a lot of value in what we do and why we get work like that. But some customers, want to go a different way. Maybe it'll be a little cheaper, and then
I mean, I think you hit one of it. I think what you're talking to, Pete, is organization.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have a really well-run organization, you're like, okay, it takes your blood pressure down. You're like, okay, I don't have to worry about this. Like, I can kind of turnkey. I was thinking while you're talking too, Patrick, that I imagine a lot of your clients actually live in the cities or live down here.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
So for convenience, actually, I have to imagine it's a lot easier to drive to Excelsior, talk with you, design with you. They're a lot closer here than they are their cabin. The cabin is their escape. The cabin is their refuge. The cabin is the place that they want to go to. They probably don't live up there. Is that about right?
That was I might speak to that. That was when we started this a long time ago. That was the original main kind of thrust, if you will, or focus on how could we make this easier for the client, which does make a lot of sense. And it's more user-friendly for them and convenient. And so that's totally true.
How have you found, so you do architecture in-house, does that become ever a conflict of interest where, let's say, local architects or local designers either A, won't refer work to you, obviously, or if a client has contracted with an architect firm, are you going to be in the running to look at it, to bid it with the client, or not? Is there a conflict of interest there because you do in-house architecture or not?
I have found, because when we were developing this, I had to think through all that. And for example, during the recession, the big recession, when we had to lay off virtually everyone, and including 4 of my architects, 2 of my CAD draftsmen, and all that went out the window. Okay, what was I going to do? You sat there and go, what am I going to do? Well, it's like you had to build it back up, right? How are you going to build it back up? I don't have no money to hire architects. You hire partners. And that's a critical thing because you're hiring them as a partner, as a team member. Once you develop that relationship, and we did that, once you transition back into, let's say, having architects on the staff, you already have them fundamental relationships. You're giving them work. And if I can speak to today, for example, we have one inside architect. That's not enough to do all of our work. So they still know they're going to get a bulk of our work while we're having a lot of control, which it is when you have in-house architects. So we have a lot of control and commitment on the in-house architect that we do have, but they're still getting work out from us.
I think that's actually a really nice model. I can imagine like we were on a remodel recently here in Deep Haven, and it's a whole house, but it's more, I told the homeowner, I think it's like a 20% remodel and a 70% or 80% refresh. Right? Mm-hmm. And so it's not, they were concerned with one of the partners that was coming in on the interior design side that, they're like, well, do we need an architect partner? Mm-hmm. And I kind of explained to them what I said, on a scale from 1 to 10, it was all interior, no addition. And this particular remodel was, and to me, I said on a scale of complexity, this is like a 1 out of 10.
Right.
So I said, I'm not overly concerned about, this, because the design partner, the interior design partner was going to do most of
take care of it.
Yeah, take care of it. But I could see like if I was, a design builder, that is something that like, oh man, I would draw that in a heartbeat. Yeah. And it's it makes it really easy for the client too.
It's a tough, but
it kind of is a balance. I like what your balance is because you never want to have so much overhead that then you're always looking for it. So it seems like you're a little under, you've got some extra capacity or your company needs more work. And so like, hey, we'll keep this guy busy. That allows us to, get 30-40% of our other stuff. And it keeps you to still relationship and business development with other architects and designers and things like that.
Yeah, but on the customer side, there's a little thing that happens too, because although we believe that design build is a really good thing for us and the client because you're controlling everything and focused on the budget and a lot more control there. When you're going outside, you get a little less control of that with our professional architects because there's 2 different models there. But I honor both, and I explained this to the customer. But some customers, it's hard for them to go with one custom company like Design Build because they think that they have no control over cost and everything, which is an honorable thought. So you have to build that trust. Basically, it's trust. But on the same token, if they're in a position where they say, well, we want to hire an outside architect, you can still be a part of that. You can still be one of 2 builders or one of 3, or transition into partnering with the architect and the owner with no one else. So there's a dance that's played there.
And I like the fact that your company is dynamic enough to kind of modify to all of those things.
Yeah.
How did you guys have interior design in-house then too?
We had two back before the recession, and we had to eliminate that too back then. And now we have one selection coordinator.
We do have Olivia, and she's doing great.
Yeah, she's doing what.
And it's nice to have that. We do a lot of with remodeling, a lot of refinishes. So keeping track of all the selections, finishes. So she also does a selection coordination, which is an important piece, making sure that all the things are, ordered and ready to go in when we need them to go in. So that's been really critical as well.
It's funny. It's a bigger role than you would think. I mean, that project coordination, I'd like my project manager to sort of be, we run a pretty lean ship here. And so it's like, in years past, we had a dedicated project coordinator, which I really appreciated and liked. And, they were partnered with our project managers, and they could kind of, it makes everyone's jobs easier. Kind of like, I think in design world, they call it expediters too, right? They have people that just basically, but it's something
that design and selections and tracking and product delivery and all that has gotten 10 times harder than it ever was.
And why do you think that is, Pete?
I think it's product availability, number one, when you're going to get it. It's very hard to pin people down on delivery times. For example, I just went through that with tile. Before, it didn't seem to be that much, but I think with COVID and everything else, that has kind of been a little block to get over.
Squishy.
The second part, and it's part of my mantra lately, is, and I experience this in Florida and other places, is that I believe a lot of the times the people we're working with in all regard, and it doesn't necessarily have to be building, the level of folks you're working with, on an important basis, it doesn't seem like the person on the other end gets it too much. I mean, it's just like the level of service and the level of completeness and accuracy has dropped. Where before it seemed like things flowed pretty good, that's much more difficult now. So having a selection coordinator, interior designer, or something, to track that and to make sure of that is critical. Because it just happened on my job. I didn't have that on my own job up north. And what happened? All the tile that I paid extra for to deliver and then went up there and then opened the box, the tile was wrong.
Right. How do you make or do you have all the selections done before you start a remodel?
Typically not. We do like to be there before we, especially behind the last couple of years has really shown us that having all that done and pre-ordered, I like to say figuratively, in the garage ready to be put in is an asset to getting the project produced efficiently.
The reason I asked that is I just made that switch probably a year and a half ago. It's, it takes a while when you make a company philosophy decision or a cultural change,
right,
or operational change like this. It takes a little while to change your practices. I'd say it took me about 2 years, and we're there now. But a lot of it starts with us when we meet with the client.
Right. Yeah.
If you tell the client on the front end, remodel is going to take 6 months, and in your mind you think maybe I can do this in 4 or 5, but I'm going to tell them a little longer so that there's not disappointment. Versus the old, most owners and most salespeople are optimists, right? And I tell them 4 months and it takes me 6.
Absolutely.
Man, I really thought, I thought things were cheaper. I thought things were faster, but darn it, I've been doing this for 20 years and I keep saying the same things. But anyway, where I'm going with this is we just had one where this homeowner, the one I was just mentioning, they're interviewing several other builders, and one builder said, I can start, in a week or two. And when I was meeting with this client yesterday, I said, I have the capacity to do the work, in the next week or two. But I said, we will not be doing the work in the next week or two. You're going to be about 60 to 90 days before we can start. And here's why.
Yeah.
You've got to design it. You've got to select it. You've got to go in for permitting. And then we have to price it, unless you're willing to basically just give me a blank check.
Yep.
But I said, here's the thing. It's still not a good process, because at the end of the day, it'll be cheaper. It'll be faster. I think the net time will actually be less, but you've got to take the time on the front end to really get your ducks in a row. And I think if it really started with myself being the owner, really owning that story with the homeowner on the front end.
Yep.
And I have found that, and they're like, oh, okay. Cause I don't know if we should forget this, but we have done this before. We're not. This is not our first rodeo. We don't need the practice. And so if it waits a couple more weeks, and it is frustrating because the homeowner has finally decided, you know what, we're going to go with Lake Country. Okay, let's go. And then the first thing you tell them is like, okay, now we got to wait a little while. And they're like, wait a minute, we're ready to go.
Not what we bought.
No. And so anyway, I feel like as owners of businesses, we need to do a better job just explaining these types of things to the homeowners. And I think then the client is happier. I mean, for instance, how do you guys handle, what percentage of your homeowners will live in the home while you remodel versus move out?
I would say probably 75% of them.
I would say that.
Stay in. You stay in the house.
We've done. I remember one dine out we did. I love that family. They had 3 kids, small kids, a dog and a cat, husband and wife, in the middle of country club, and we remodeled their whole house, and they lived in it.
Do you just move them around room to room, or what?
Well, what I said after that experience, and I tell people this, I says, it's not me, it's you. It's what you can handle. Now, they ate dust and they liked it, and they knew it was coming. Other people, because I told them it was going to come. Other people, if they see some dust on their desk up on the second floor, they freak. And so it's kind of like, how can you handle this? And you have to have that discussion, because a lot of people say, wow, we'd really like to stay here. We don't want to rent a house. I'm going, well, how do you like dust?
Right. No, I mean, we try to do everything we can to move them out of the house, unless it's just a clean break.
Yeah. Right.
I don't know if we walked away from a job. I usually say, so we happened to, and I'm a hypocrite because we had a COVID baby and we remodeled our home while we were doing it, and we lived there while my wife was pregnant, right? So all the things you shouldn't do. But then that's like probably been the best sales tool I've had to get people to move out. I'm like, tell me, okay, I did this. I'm telling you, you don't want to do it. And so maybe by speaking in first person, maybe they finally believe me versus the other one.
This episode is brought to you by Pella Northland. For 19.5 years, I've been building homes, and 95% of all of my homes have used Pella windows. I couldn't be happier to call them a partner in our builds and our remodels. Whether you're an architect, a designer, or a remodeler, I'd highly recommend Pella windows. They can fit old homes, new homes, reclaimed, commercial, and really everything in between. Pella is a company that we trust and that we recommend to our clients. Additionally, in management, Peter and Ed have just been absolute fantastic people to work with, as well as mentors to me personally. So when it comes time to look for a window, I'd highly recommend Pella Windows. Find more at PellaNorthland.com. Also, if you're interested, you can hear episode 1 where I interview Peter and Ed together for a great listen on business and Pella Windows.
This episode is brought to you by Adaptive, the software for builders that automates draws, budgets, and bookkeeping with AI. For over a year now, I've been partnered with Adaptive, and they've just been an amazing game changer in terms of efficiency in our time and all our bookkeeping. From the time we get an invoice, we import it into their system. The AI codes it, cost codes it, job codes it. All we have to do is review it, pass it through the people internally in the office, all digitally, and then it gets approved and paid all via ACH. It's becoming extremely fast and saving us countless hours a day and a week. When it comes to draws, all of our budgets now are set in Adaptive as well. So now when we cost code against the draws, we can do our change orders, and then with a click of a button, we can submit these draws to our title companies or to our homeowners for faster payment. If you're looking to save time, and if you're looking to be accurate, I highly recommend Adaptive. Additionally, if you'd like to listen to one of their founders share the story of Adaptive, you can listen to episode number 15 on the Curious Builder podcast. I found that, contrasting new home clientele and remodelers, the clientele, I think it's easier to please a remodel client than it is a new home client. Do you think that's true?
Oh boy, that's a big question. I think in either way it takes the same amount of effort. I mean, because, well, here's what I would say, and here's what I've learned in 50 years. It's the client. It's not us. I mean, now here's why I say that. We deliver the same thing all the time, or we try to. And we're very successful most of the time. And most of the time, people write and tell us how good we are, most of the time, and not all the time. But, for there's an amount of people out there that it doesn't matter what we do. It's just not going to be smooth and easy. And that's what I've come to learn. So what I mentor and teach is before you even take the job, get to know the customer, find out what they do for a living, which that's a whole nother story I've learned. Different people operate differently. And find out all that information to get inside the person and know if it's your client. Because sometimes you'll be sitting there selling a job like I've done, and I know it's not a bad client. I know we're going to get in a problem, and we did get in a problem, and it was my fault, but I took the job because we needed it.
Right. Yeah. I think you're right. I mean, I never thought about in this term before, but it just came to me. The variable is the client. Mm-hmm. The variable isn't your staff. Yep. The variable isn't construction. We know how to do that. Yep. So the variable is the client. I think you're 100% right, Pete. Where I was going to go with this, and this is just my perception, is that remodel clients, in my experience, tend to be a little bit more laid back, a little bit more comfortable. They've either lived there for a while, or we do a lot of work where they're buying it and then we remodel it. And so, but I find that it's not that their expectations are lower. Their expectations just aren't as high, if that makes sense. And it's like, I often joke with my clients, this is maybe not the best sales line, but it's like, even a bad remodel job is better than what's here already. So the level of expectations, like, this is going to be great.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't, but like sometimes when you do a new home, like it's such a bigger purchase in terms of dollars. Mm. And so, like, I've often equated a new home to getting married. The bride and the husband, they're very excited, and they spent, maybe they're, stereotypically it's, the missus has spent, a large part of her mental time thinking about what the wedding day is going to be like, all the costs that go into it. And then it all hinges on this one reveal, and it either is great or it's bad. Like, can there not be an average wedding? Can there not be like a middle? And I feel like sometimes new home psychology can be like that. Like, it's their dream home. It's going to be perfect. Yeah. It's all these aspirations. You're like, whoa, we're now climbing Everest with a heavy pack, and it's getting pretty heavy. And so I have found that when I meet with my new home clients, I often will talk about, like, anytime I hear the word perfection, that's like an immediate stop sign for me. And I'll stop them, usually humorously, and just say, you know what? We're building this outside in the elements. It's raining, it's snowing, it's hailing, humidity. It's amazing we get as much right as we do. And I look for their reactions. Mm. And you can kind of see if they laugh and kind of agree with you, like, okay, they get it. But sometimes you'll see where, like, nope, they don't get it. Like, they expect perfect. And to me, that's a walk away. Yeah. That's, there's certain red flags. Because I think what you're talking about, Pete, is identifying your ideal client.
Yeah.
And we've all made the mistake of taking clients. The only reason you understand that is you've taken clients you shouldn't have.
You want all your clients to be your ideal clients, but that, of course, doesn't happen. So and history proves you're going to take jobs not your ideal client or hard clients. That's going to happen naturally. So the key there is to understand your client and then talk to staff and mentor them on how to take care of that client. Because every client's different and they all have different needs. If you don't understand that or focus on that, then you're delivering the same thing to each client just by delivering the same thing to each client. And sometimes that don't work. Sometimes different people need different things, right?
What tools have you found helpful for conflict resolution over the years?
Meeting with people in person and talking with them. I think that's really the biggest one, because you can be by phone, emails. It's easy to be a keyboard warrior and
keyboard warrior.
In some respects, sometimes
the 10 o'clock, the 1 a.m. When you get the email at 1 a.m., you're like, what are you doing at 1 a.m.? You should be sleeping.
But I think usually, I think what we all both said in different ways. If you have a good person that's your client, that's a pre-qualified to a certain respect, usually you're on some type of wavelength that's similar. And I think good practical people can resolve things, even if it goes amiss in some way.
I think you're wise on that, Patrick. I think in person you're 100% right. I just think that people, especially in Minnesota too, I think in general, it's hard for people, and I think it's a good thing. It's hard for people, feel uncomfortable. People don't want animosity unless you're a rare person. Most people want there to be peace, and they're just frustrated. A lot of times they just need to be heard, say or sorry, whatever it is. I've said it many times on the podcast, but I keep saying it because I think it's one of the most powerful tools, but it's, a soft answer turneth away wrath. And I often will think that to myself in my truck before I go into a client's house and just think, okay,
Yeah.
you know, there's a tendency in humans, right, to like, you know, tighten up that the fight or flight thing, right? And you're like combat. But if you can go in with a little softness, and most people just want to be listened to. I'm not saying it's easy.
Yep.
Sometimes it's really, really hard.
Yep.
And I think, you know, I was talking, we had Stephen Yock, my lawyer, on recently, and he's hilarious, really awesome listen. And but he had just said, you know, as businesses, we are actually held to a much higher standard than a homeowner, right? And so we see a homeowner getting really emotional, and the human side of us wants to respond to that emotion with emotion.
Right.
But we actually, as the professionals, have to sort of, you know, de-escalate the situation, which is hard because ultimately there's always this balance. If you do get caught in a cycle where a client is, you know, highly flammable, if you will, that it, you know, you're constantly bringing water, and it gets exhausting.
I think the one word you use was listen, and another word I mentor. It's just like you have to listen to the client. Now, that's always been, actually, to be honest, it's always been pretty hard for me. I'm a very emotional guy, and I think I know what I know, and I'm good at what I do. And so when you get in those situations, when you're actually right, and you know you're right, but you're not going to win the argument, it's hard to lose the argument for people like myself.
You're using logic, right? And we're using our experience.
Exactly. And I've run into, I'll compare that to people I've run into in business myself and or subcontract, for example. Like I'm having some work done up north. You know, sometimes you could just experience the opposite of that coming from them. And you walk away and you go, yikes, the guy's not even listening. The guy doesn't even know what we're talking about. All he wants to do is tell me he's right. You know, so there's a big difference there. And it's really hard for me to just calm down and listen. Patrick's much more good at that than I am. Like, you have to have, so at the end of the day, what I've learned, and especially the staff I'm looking at now in our company, you have to have the right person addressing that big problem, the person that listens, that can negotiate, that can come to conclusion. That's hard for me.
I don't know who said it, but I like seek to understand before you're understood, right? So
I think that was Zig. Zig.
Oh, Zig Ziglar?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, I'm
right. So I think it's really just at the core, just, you know, like you said, listening, understanding. And I think in the end of the day, that's most important, because you can say and do a lot of different things, but until you can understand where the client's coming from, and I think it's also setting the expectation up front. Things are going to happen, right? Just saying that itself, you know, I think at least hopefully they can remember that and know that with even the best, you know, producer, builder, things are going to come up. It's a complex process, and I think especially people who haven't gone through it before, you know, may be surprised by how, you know, all the parts and pieces and elements that come together to create the beautiful space.
I tell them, you know, the construction business is the easy part. Construction business is actually problem solving. It's not construction. I mean, you're going to put the wall together the same way regardless, and you're going to put the sheathing on and the trim up the same way regardless. That's all going to go up one way or another, period. But it's the problems. So I tell a customer, I'm saying, you know, there's going to be problems in building your house. And they look at you, I'm going, you're not going to hear about mostly all of them. Some of them you will, but mostly all of them are taken care of. But that's the type of business it is.
I like that. That's a great, I like that a lot. We're problem solvers. Yeah,
we actually are. I mean, you open up a can of beans, to make the can of beans you open up. That's not the same thing here. Mm-hmm. Everything different.
Just because I want to respect the time too, I want to talk a little bit about, you know, there's two things, and maybe they go, but I want to talk about the Lake Country Academy and some of the training you're doing, and then I want to talk about your aging in place focus before we run out of time. So let's move to the next topic here. Tell us a little bit about your Lake Country Academy.
I am actually heading that up. I've been asked to head that up because I have a lot more time now, and it's on the company. So Bruce and I, who's been with me 30 years, been asked to, being that we have carpenters, and being that Bruce and I were carpenters, it's critical to us, and we're enjoying putting it together. But the main thing is right now is to make sure our carpenters are getting trained. Because in this environment we have today, Everything is specific. You have siders siding, you have roofers roofing, you have window companies putting windows in. The carpenters aren't getting trained. I got trained in every aspect of everything. I used to roof. I used to side. It's not like that. So these people are not getting trained in those things at all. And plus, when you look at a project and you have to get it done, you have to make money, you have to get the labor to come in on time, you need, and all that stuff. Who's going to take the time to train people? In my day, people took the time to train me. In this day, that doesn't happen too much unless you have the right people. So we found that, hey, if we're going to keep our staff, enhance our people, give them opportunity and lift them up, well then we've done similar things before, not to this extent. We're going to have a carpentry training academy where we're just laying it out right now. We're developing our a booklet for them to check off on with the lead people. We're going to follow through with it. We're going to have toolbox meetings at our office. We're going to train and bring in associates to train certain things. So it's all about making people journeyman carpenter men and women.
I think that's incredible, and I think I applaud you for doing that. Yeah. I think you're 1,000% right. As someone who is not a handy person, on top of it, I know I can't do the training. I mean, if we don't really self-perform any work, so it's kind of a mute point for me. But even so, I can see the value in the training. I've learned to my own detriment. I tend to try to hire A+ talent because I don't want to train them. So I just want to hire them. But that sometimes doesn't work out. Either your overhead gets, pretty high because you're bringing in, star talents. But, you look at professional sports, there's a balance between bringing in a veteran. But honestly, in order to balance your payroll with the salary caps, you're better off, drafting right a good rookie and training them through your system. And, then you keep them and you reward them. And I think that's something that I know I need to do better, even if it's not training them for carpentry, even training your people just to do the job, right? Whatever it might be.
Yeah. And it's also what's going to happen too. It's also going to weed those people out. Not that you want it, that's the right term, but your stars and your people like Bruce and I were a long time ago who want to be that guy are going to excel. They're going to just move up the ladder. And then there's going to be some people who don't. And there's a difference because those people aren't going to move too much.
What's so funny? Do you guys find this as owners of your company? So I do just with the podcast and just social media in general. So I'm a voracious reader. I constantly, just when I exercise, I'm listening to books, I'm listening to podcasts. So I love listening. And for a number of years, I've tried to get people in my team, just trying to get them caught up. Like, hey, you should read this book, or, let's do a book together. And I've never had anyone on my team want to do that ever. Never, zero. I am 0 for 100 with this idea. And I'm in my mind, you don't want to be judgmental. They're just not into it. They're just not passionate about it. And I wouldn't want to be so narrow-minded to think that only owners can do that, because that's not right. No. But Diaz, I think to your point, P, is people that are passionate, people that want to self-improve, people that want to grow, they're curious. They want to learn more. I've had to temper. I know one builder that he just says, I'm reading this, and if you'd like a copy, I'll buy you one. And then his team is bigger than mine. And then every once in a while, there'll be somebody that says, yeah, I'd be interested in that. And he'll buy it for that one person. But he stopped a long time ago just forcing it down people's throats, because that also doesn't work either.
No.
And anyway, I think you kind of spoke to it. There are certain carpenters that want to be trained. They want to get better. And obviously, as entrepreneurs and owners, it really excites us, because we're okay, now I can... it's just really, good to see.
This is a funny quick one. I had a girl find me out that graduated from the University of Minnesota, come to my office because she wanted to find out more about residential construction, blah, blah, blah. So she said in my office, and so I look at her, I said, so tell me, so you just graduated? And she goes, yeah, I just graduated from the University of Minnesota. I said, so in what? She goes, well, architecture. I'm saying, so you want to become an architect? She, yeah, I went to school for architecture. I said, so what do you want to do? And she says, architecture. I said, well, is that your passion? I mean, do you really love that? Or you like building bikes? What do you do? What do you really love doing? And so I had a conversation like that with her, which kind of stopped her. But the end result was talking about passion, of which, I had in my carpentry, it was never work to me. In my whole life, I've never worked, quote unquote, because I just love it. And if you get people who work for you like that, you have what I call stars. You don't got to worry about them folks, and you know who they are because it's a passion. It's not work. But for those people that it's just work, it's the hourly rate, and it's, like that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I 100% agree with you. My brother-in-law is quite a bit younger than me. He just graduated college, and he moved down to Arizona. He wants to work on spaceships. And so he SpaceX,
Awesome.
but he's at Honeywell right now working on turbine engines and whatnot. And he has a young boss who's just really got it going on, and he really wants to impress her. And he goes, I'm going to have her out with coffee. And I said, what would really impress her is if you already started, whatever you're going to ask her, like, already do it. Like if you want to do something, like, are you already studying it? Are you already actively engaged? Because usually to an owner, if someone comes to you and says, "Hey Pete, I'd really like to, be a lead trimmer," or I guess we'll use your example, the lady, and she's young, so I'm not faulting that. It's just an example here, but like architecture, if she had said, "Yeah, on my side, I built some homes," or like you can tell like what the real passion is because they do it offline too. To your point, your passion, and so. Anyway, I was just giving my brother-in-law some advice to like, if you want to impress this lady, already start doing, researching it and, maybe working out on the side. And, there's lots of people that have their hobbies, working on cars or whatever it is that they doesn't, for us, for me anyway, it's, athletics. And it's, I'm always asking people about their lifestyle questions about, what they eat and how they exercise and things like that. And, I know, Patrick, we talked a little bit beforehand, you do fasting. And so that always like triggers. I'm like, ooh, tell me more. Because I'm just interested about it.
I shouldn't have told you I had a blueberry muffin.
You might get hungry. Well, that's super helpful. Let's talk a little bit about aging in place. You guys had mentioned that a little bit. Maybe Patrick, you can pick that up. Tell us a little bit about how the clients have resonated with that and how that's been maybe either a focus or kind of a passion of Lake Country to sort of really, service that need for clients.
Yeah, well, I think it all started with my mom and dad getting into it and seeing the need for universally designed spaces for so everyone can use them for a lot of different reasons, and also just a need for our market with our aging population and also our local housing stock. A lot of 2-story split level houses that maybe don't fit directly within those constraints. So we've saw a need for that 10, 15 years ago. They got CAP certified, which is one certification to understand all those details and how to, what to promote, what is important to keep people in their homes. And so we started a division called Stay at Home and since have focused on doing some one-level living houses in this area. So we hope to be breaking ground soon. He spoke of doing his back.
What's involved?
After not having done one in a long time, we're right there with you. In a certain
Are you going to be doing like kind of like the villa concept, or what are you doing?
It was
one level living.
One level living. Yeah, but it's about 2,700 square feet, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths with an optional basement,
elevator
space for an elevator. But yeah, just
it's all designed.
Yeah, so we're really excited about that. We've also done a lot of projects in that stay-at-home division to remodel people's houses. The main level owners, the main level primary suite has been a big one. Just adding on those suites so people can live on one level. If it's a 2-story house, for instance, we've put in elevators. And also simple things, widening doorways, lever handles instead of circular ones,
But we have a small
backing, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it's like it's not very sexy, but man, you try to put in an ADA handrail without backing, it just rips out.
So that's a good example of something we in our specs, for instance, all of our projects we put in backing in the bathrooms. We started doing that.
Aging that universal design should be design. It shouldn't be specific to aging in place or anything, because they're all features like wider hallways and handles instead of knobs and stuff, which people don't see as weird. It goes with the house. It's just designed that way. And I'll segue back to how it started. Actually, it was because Sue's mother and father, when we moved them up here, we lived through their last stage with them. And I saw my father-in-law, in his roller that was having a hard time rolling on the shag carpeting, and my grandmother getting off the stool and all that other stuff. And so that's what prompted my wife to really start thinking about it. And so that's how it started with my wife, and we got certified aging in place specialists back then to develop that division. But what I found in all this is I got involved with groups and everything. And the initial thing I found was that, everybody needed a new toilet paper holder or a new door widened. And you can't make money doing that. I mean, you want to help people, but you're going to spend more money than anything. So we realized that what we really want to do with that is, number one, work for people who want to create a different space in their home to stay in their home and change it, which is a bigger job with profit, and you're helping them. And also now we transition into aging in place, one level living home. And not that this was the instigator for that, but one of my customers we did a big remodel for here. I'm talking to Mark one day, and he goes, yeah. He says, I'm buying this house, and you're putting in all this money to this house because it's one level. I'm saying, yeah, I know. He says, there's no Ramblers around Lake Minnetonka. I'm going, what? He goes, go look. They're all 2 stories. And I'm going, really? And so he says, those folks like that are 60 up and everything, they don't want a 2-story house. They want 2,700 square foot, one level living. I mean, I'm living in one. So that's kind of how our spec home developed, and which we're focused on, not big, one level living. If they need a more space in their lower level, put an elevator in. And then you have a more economically efficient house, if you will, which still costs a lot of money nowadays. But it's designed for them. So
yeah, I haven't heard too many builders that have that sort of knowledge base or focus like you have. I think that's really neat.
Yeah.
Maybe in the end here, just because I always love to ask this question with father and son and just family-owned businesses, how do you anticipate, and maybe you're already there, but how do you transition from one generation to the next? What does that look like? I assume the young, in this case, the young buck wants probably to make some changes. You've done it this way, and I know it is very independent on relationships, but where are you guys at in sort of transferring things? And are there other siblings involved, or is it just Patrick? Or walk me through a little bit how a family-owned business sort of navigates the handing of the baton. We're in the Olympics right now, right? We've got the 4x100 here, or whatever race we're running, and you've got to hand off the baton. How does that work?
That's number one. You have here's what I would tell people: why don't you plan on 2 years of work to begin with? Plan on 2 years of work that I did, because I was the one that was pushing it, if you will. Someone needs to. Because there's so much work involved in understanding finances and legalities and all that stuff, which I knew nothing about, to be honest. That's 2 years of work with them people, back and forth, and then you have the family, and you have your kids who grew up in a business, which lived my life of being consumed with my business, but they still love me. I mean, it's kind of like, hey, they always worked for my business. How am I going to honor them? And so that's one thought. And then you think about other people that work for you, like, how are we going to do this? I have to replace myself. I have to replace Sue. I mean, Patrick's there, but what about the work I do? Then you get caught up in this whole bigness of, oh, my God, who am I going to find? Well, luckily, that unfolded in a very good way. And Renee is one of the owners now who's been with me almost 30 years. Her husband, Rob, architect background, is our other owner. He's been with me about 6 years. Mm-hmm. But then there's, on a personal level, so when I organized a way to honor our other children with it, one of which is going to have a larger part of the business at some point in time. But we ended up kind of working through all those little details to find out who's interested in the business, who's not, how will it work, how can we do this to make people happy. And I'll tell you, it's very emotional. It's a lot of work. And one thing I learned is that, and one of my best friends told me, he says, whenever you get to an issue, anything, you go to the agreement. You don't need to talk about it. You don't need to lose sleep on it. Whenever you get an issue, go to the agreement, because that's why you spent 2 years on and spent all that money on, and then you read the agreement. So, when things get to that place, so that's what I've learned about that. Not that I've had that issue, but that's an important thing to learn. And so 2 years, honor your family, and be lucky enough to have people within your company that have the wherewithal to be part owners. And we were lucky enough to fill up the void with Sue and myself, and with Patrick, Rob, and Renee, and Nolan in the background. we have that group of people that fill those voids, which I think to me was the absolute most important part. Because if you just sell it and move away, who are you leaving it to, and do you care or not? Well, in our case, it's been our life. We do care. If you just want to take the money and run because you had a business, that's a whole different story. You take the money and go, and you don't really care. So it's been
that's
it's been
from your side of the, I mean, that's a great answer. I think it's really, I love the idea of the time that it takes. And there's a lot of family-owned businesses, specifically seems like around and in construction. I've always wondered, I was lucky or not lucky, I had zero interest in being a builder. My dad was a builder. My mom was an interior designer. They retired in 2001 and I started in 2004 or 5. And so it was like that, we never really had to deal with that. And so I'm a little older. So our kids, I've often joked in years past that I don't want my kids to be in building because I mean that I'd have to work, into my 70s. And I have so many hobbies that I hope to be doing all those hobbies. But now I've sort of changed my tune because, my daughter, she's 8, but man, she's with it. She'd be a phenomenal owner. She's got her mom's brain and my outgoing personality, so she'd be a force to reckon with. If I was a little bit smarter, I'd probably be a little further along too. But anyway,
there's my salesperson.
There's my salesperson and owner. But and I just think we need more women in construction. So I'm really excited about that. But honestly, I just care if my kids are passionate about it, I'll figure out a way to stay in it. But right now, I've talked about this a lot. We don't have enough time to talk about it now. But I essentially have a job. I don't have a business.
Right.
Because it's only been the last couple of years that I've realized the difference between working on your business and working in your business. And that was just never, if you don't know the concept, then you're in it. You're not on it.
Yep.
And so it's only now that I'm sort of thinking about long term of like, oh, okay, I've got 20 years now, God willing, in health that, okay, now I can actually at least formulate what would a business look like that could attract a sale. I still think, listening to your guys' story on how you're selling, especially when you empower people within your company, to me, that's the only way that I would even have a shot at doing something like that. Because, if you can't bring people in from inside your team and create some equity ownership there, and plus it sounds exciting. I've been quoting this a lot lately and I like it, which is, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Yeah. And I feel like that, what you guys are sort of, the epitome of that you're going to go far because you're going in a group.
Yeah. And I realize this through everything that, Patrick, always had a thought of growing the company. He would say things about maybe building houses more and stuff, just kind of nuanced stuff. And so I thought, but, moving on, I got to a place where I did a certain amount of business. And, I had enough. I mean, being through everything, I was never this hugely growth-orientated, I want to be the biggest builder in the world. What I always wanted to do was give everybody a good job for a fair price. That was my mantra. And so that's how I built the business. Mm-hmm. And then now they are going to start building aging in place homes and stuff, so they have a different future. But
Patrick, maybe as we wrap up here, what are some things that you're excited about, the future as you're, now an owner, and, what are some things that you would see changing 3 years, 5 years, or I guess what excites you about the future now?
It's a very good question. I think, on the kind of tail end of transition, we've done a lot of work to get here. We have, given the age of our company, kind of updated a lot of our processes, technology. We're using technology a lot more with our software and stuff to manage our business that we were never doing before. So that really excites me, maybe having the opportunity to do more with less. Our team, I think we have the best team with our field team and the office team that we've ever had. A lot of good people that, really, like we were all just talking about, do more, have opportunities. And so that's really exciting. I think just in general with where the industry is going, with aging in place stuff, we're also into sustainable building principles and things like that. And just continuing to do fun projects. I mean, I think that's most why we're here, and I think the most thing we get the joy out of. 70% of our business comes from referrals and past clients, so keeping that going and
create relationships.
Yes,
it's just like that's what it's all about.
So I don't know. I mean, I think we definitely could grow. Maybe, but I think just where we've been in the last 2 or 3 years, it's kind of, and we're kind of at the tail end of that. feels like I think our word for this year was just stabilize. Really just with our new leadership team and some of the new aspects, the design department and everything, get that all rocking and rolling, and then we'll kind of figure out where we can go. And I think that with the aging place house, that's I think a big need, demand for that, and we hope to do more of those.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, thank you very much for your time and coming on the podcast today. And we'll have all your Instagram handles and websites in the show notes. And if people want to reach out to you directly, is LinkedIn the best place? Is the website the best place if they want to connect with you?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Probably the website.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Probably the website or email or call. I mean, Instagram. I'm one of those. I don't want I'm good on Facebook, though.
That's awesome. Well, thanks again, gents. Appreciate your time.
Thanks,
and we'll see you around.
Appreciate you,
This
Mark.
was a lot of
Good luck.
fun, Mark.
Yeah,
Thank
good.
you.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
I had a lot of fun, and good luck to you, too.
All right. Thank you.
We are happy to announce that we have a one-to-one coaching session that can be found on our Curious Builder podcast platform. So you can book a time with me, and it'll be 1 hour to ask any sort of questions that you want, talk about business, talk about life. Maybe you're dealing with a difficult client and you just want to maybe shop with another builder and say, hey, how do I handle this? Or maybe you're looking to rebrand your company. Whatever it might be, you can head to our website and book a time, and I'd be happy to sit down and give you that hour, and we can talk about whatever's on your mind. The podcast has now been running for the last 2 years, and it's because of people like you that are listening to the podcast, spreading the word, that our audience continues to grow. One of the ways that you as listeners can help support the show is head to our merch page, our shop page on thecuriousbuilderpodcast.com. You'll see that we have 3 different offerings now. We have a shirt that we partnered with Harnish on. We have a hat from BOGO that I use for ultra running. It's also just incredibly sweat resistant. So for if any of you guys are outside in the sun working, the hat looks great, but it's also extremely resilient to sweat. And then of course our Hive notebooks. These notebooks are amazing. I was given one a couple years ago and I've fallen in love with it. The paper's made out of stone. It's waterproof. It's tear-proof. It's amazing. So if you like what you listen to, if you appreciate the show and the content that we're producing, please head to the shop page. Buy a notebook, buy 2, give some to your employees, give some to the guys in the field. We'd really appreciate it. Thanks for listening to the Curious Builder podcast. If you like what you listen to, please give us a 5-star rating and write us a review. It really means a lot. It's a great way for us to just understand what you like about the podcast and what we can keep doing. So like and review, and please share with your friends and family. Find out more at curiousbuilderpodcast.com.